Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great and following the 3 H's of the channel, which are happy, healthy, and hydrated. And in this video, I have something from Maine, something from New England, from Chicago, and from Mississippi, and more. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, pull up a stump, strap in, and let's get into it. Thank you for watching. So I don't know if this would even classify as paranormal, at least in the sense of cryptids and stuff, but it's the only creepy story that I have. At the time, I was employed as a receptionist for my town's local wellness center/pharmacy. Basically a place for people to get a diagnosis for things like ADHD, bipolar, and all that stuff. I worked the early morning shift, around 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. because I live pretty close. I spend most of my time taking calls, leaving voice messages, and doing endless paperwork. Eventually, I have no more work to do at the moment. I decide to head back to the break room. There's a tiny little TV that's mounted on the wall. There's no place to sit, and it only gets the news and some other fitness channel. I put some water on to boil to make some tea, and lean against the wall and watch the news. Now, I'm not alone in the building. The janitor had just gone upstairs a few minutes before, and I went into the break room, and the resident kid psychiatrist was in his office on the first floor. And that's when I hear this bell that's near the front door ring. It's meant to let the receptionist know that someone has entered, even if they aren't at the front desk. So I go back to head to the front desk, and then I go down the hall. And there's this door that connects to the waiting room and the hallway that leads out to all the offices. It takes either a key or a punch combination to enter. I watch as the doorknob rattles violently, like someone is desperately trying to get in. I walk in from the other door from behind the front desk. There's this very tall, gaunt, and pale old man trying for the life of him just to get that door open, constantly twisting and tugging at the doorknob. Now, a quick little detail. I'm a guy, but I have really long hair, and I shave my face regularly, and if you squint, or are drunk, I do kind of look like a woman, at least my face. He seems mystified. He says, "Claire? Claire?" He coos out to me. I say, "Sir, I'm not Claire. I need you to sit down. If you have an appointment, you'll have to wait for the doctor to call you in, okay?" He looks at me with these sad and sullen eyes. He just says, "Claire." He miserably shuffles to the front door, turning one last time and giving me another sad look. He just says, "Don't leave me." And then I watch through the windows as he stumbles away and vanishes into thin air. I have no idea who the guy was. I have never seen that or him before or after this. It definitely is the scariest thing that's ever happened to me, even though for some other people, it may not come close. So I'm no storyteller, but I will try to recall as much detail as possible. Now, my experience happened on September 2nd, 2022, so not that long ago. I had been throughout the day running a few errands here and there for my dad, who is elderly. Later that same day, to return back to my dad's apartment, which just happens to be in a tall residential building in Chicago. His apartment is 6 floors up. At some point during the earlier evening, I decided to go out on the balcony for a quick cigarette. I was just standing there, staring out into thin air, not really thinking about much or doing much. As I stood there with my cigarette in hand, I shifted position and began to observe a very large tree about 20 feet away. It was roughly about 15 feet down from me. I noticed that one of the branches on this tree was bowing quite heavily, which I remember now, thinking back, was quite odd at the time. As I'm staring at this branch and trying to make sense of what my eyes are seeing, I have this horrible feeling come over me, the most intense sense of dread and fear. It was like almost every part of my body was screaming at me to turn around and run, but I didn't know why. At this very moment, the bowing branch that I had just been observing began to shake violently, despite my internal instincts still screaming at me to leave. Curiosity had now gotten the better of me, and I started to move along the railing to get a closer look. And then I saw it. What I saw at first was a small, glimmering form. As I stared a bit closer, this glimmer then became what I can only describe as a transparent human figure, and it shimmered a yellowish white color. I snapped out of my fixated stare and quickly took a step back from the railing. It suddenly hit me that what I was looking at was like something straight from the movie Predator, more specifically when the predator is using his camouflage. It was at that very moment when I realized that what I had just seen, this thing, dropped out of the tree and hit the ground below. It landed directly behind a man who just happened to be walking past at the time. The man immediately spun around, assuming that someone had thrown something at him. The only thing I noticed was a cloud of smoke or dust that arose from the ground behind the man. I waited for some time, expecting to see this thing re-emerge from the dust or the smoke, but it was completely gone. At the same time, another neighbor, just a few floors below, had also observed the exact same thing as me, and they managed to confirm all the same details. The neighbor and I then managed to track down the man who was walking past a few hours later. We had a conversation with the man, and he said that he had felt an impact, but didn't see anything when he turned around. He also went on to report that he felt the same dread that I'd experienced only a few hours before. I never knew what to call them until recently. The other day I was curious to see if anyone else has experienced what I saw and felt that day. So I began to research translucent beings or predator-like sightings. That's when I learned that they're called glimmermen. So I had an experience with what I now know is called the glimmerman. It was the late 90s, and I was living with my parents in Lowell, Massachusetts. I will never forget this experience, as this was the most terrifying encounter I have ever had in my life. 2 deployments in Iraq and 8 years as a cop. Nothing comes close to the fear that I had that day. I remember this happening in the late 90s, and I would say somewhere between 1997 to 1999. I would have been between 10 and 12 years old. We had 2 phone lines in our house, the main line located by the living room, and the second line in my brother's room. My 2 oldest brothers had already moved out of the house, and my brother wasn't home at the time. I asked my mom if I could go hang out with my friend that lived 2 blocks away. She agreed, but I remember that she was using our main line, so I went upstairs to use my brother's phone to call my friend. So I walked into my brother's room and began to dial my buddy's number. I got about halfway through dialing, and I froze. All the hair on my body stood up, and I was covered in goosebumps. It felt like my stomach sank. This feeling of being watched, and that something else had came in the room behind me, just hit me from nowhere. I knew it was there, though. I felt its presence. It was like it wanted me to know it was there. I slowly lowered the phone from my ear and carefully turned around. It was standing in the doorway of my brother's room, blocking my escape. It was huge. It was as tall as the door frame and about just as wide. I couldn't see any eyes, but I knew that it was staring at me. It looked like crystal clear water with the edge of a human form. Its cloaking or invisibility appeared to fluctuate, like the way the light passed through it seemed to refract in different directions, almost like water that could take human form. But it obviously wasn't water. The only way I could describe it was like the predator from the movie. The The short period of time that I locked eyes on this creature or being, I began to pray profusely and uncontrollably. It felt like I had no control over the words that came from my mouth. In seconds, that probably felt like minutes, it stepped into the room and toward the windows across from the door. I never bothered to see where it went or if it disappeared. At that moment, I saw the opportunity to escape. I bolted from that room and down the stairs. I ran probably the fastest I've ever ran in my life. I'm not even sure how I didn't get hurt. My mom, who was just getting off the phone, asked me if I was all right. She could tell that something had scared the absolute hell out of me. I'm 35 now, and thankfully, I haven't experienced or seen anything else like that since, and I'd like to keep it that way. I'm glad that I'm not the only one who has seen them, as it made me question my sanity. I consider myself to be skeptical and still try to figure out logical explanations for what happened to me, and I still can't. So about a year ago, I moved up near the Canadian border of Maine with my girlfriend and her mother, way out in the sticks. They own and live on about a mile of largely undeveloped land that was mostly used for logging, but oddly, very spare work had been done to it before it was sold to them for a song. We live in a couple of small one-room, quote, cabins, and it's much rougher than the average standard of modern living. I'll just say that one time I had to take a dump out in the woods and a mosquito bit me on the nutsack, if that gives you any idea of what I'm dealing with. The closest town is about 30 minutes away, and I haven't had the opportunity to pick the brains of the locals on legends and folklore just yet. I was thinking that maybe sometime I would go find where people drink in this town and start spreading a few beers and try and see if I can find any stories. For now, though, I already have a couple of personal stories, so I'll start with those. The first one isn't very exciting, but it's a little spooky. The second one happened a lot more recently and was fairly pants-shittingly terrifying. So this first one happened while my girlfriend was at work. My girlfriend's mom, I also call her mom, asked me to come out with her to replace the trail cameras. You'd think all the way out here there wouldn't be much activity, but there's a lot of poachers, a lot of petty criminals, and even gang activity, so the trail cams are necessary. We also have some mischievous, I'll put it that way, hillbilly neighbors, so we set off through the woods. I was listening closely to Mama, because she knew this place extremely well, and I just didn't. Also, she intended to leave the next year, and wanted me to know the woods inside and out so I could take care of her daughter, my girlfriend. I digress. Mom asked if I want to see the ghost hole. My ears perk up. I think, hell yeah, some spooky shit. And I have a shotgun. My thoughts were, oh cool, I live here now and there's a place called Ghost Hole on the property. Mom is a pragmatic and tough woman, not a person that's prone to calling a place something with a paranormal connotation. Suddenly, I think, what if there is something to all of this? I take a fork in the trail that leads to a path of all fern and grass. We take this to a clearing with a small swamp. Mama tells me some more of the schizo neighbors have asked permission to perform rituals and seances there. She generally won't let anyone come all the way out here. She says that nothing good can come of yokels stirring it up. She said to me, "You're a good man. You'll be fine to take a look. I won't go further than this, though. To me, it feels like the ground is hollow, as if it could just fall away. Nothing grows here but some ferns and this shitty bear grass. That tree in the middle is barely hanging on, and I feel it's only out of spite. I've taken pictures here on my good camera, and it's always full of floaters and random artifacts. It doesn't pick up on phones so well, though. I notice that the animal tracks all go around it." She points to them, and then walks the perimeter a bit as I cross the threshold, pointing out more and more animal tracks that completely avoid this area. She says to me, if they don't like it, I don't like it either. It's right around this time that I'm walking in the area that my skin prickles and I get a cold chill, and I get this greasy feeling like I need to shower, despite the weather being pretty mild. The normally vicious flies and mosquitoes are just gone, completely avoiding this place. The birds are even staying away from it. And sure enough, there's not even a moose print or a pile of dung inside of it. Then she says, come on, I don't like it here. We're just wasting daylight. I leave the clearing and the bugs immediately go in for the kill. The greasy feeling, though, subsides. We check up on the trail cams and then go home. I tell my girlfriend about it, a very physically strong and not easily cowed woman like her mom. She just tells me to be careful out there and not to mess with it too much. As of me writing this, that's really all I know about the place. One day more recently, I was there myself, and it didn't feel super awful, but I also felt like that I was more allowed there, and that I shouldn't linger any longer than taking a look. But another time before that takes place the second story that I want to tell you. I was poking around Ghost Hole again. Not a whole lot happened, so I left and went home. Then, I decided to feed my pet rats their snacks. They love bananas. I look out the window, and I see this huge raccoon that's been stealing chicken eggs and really messing up the trash. It makes eye contact with me and bolts. I've been trying to get that raccoon for weeks. I even fed him half a rich chocolate cake in hopes that it would just kill the thing, but instead, it just made him that much fatter. So I grabbed my shotgun, a glass of wine for me, and some tuna for bait. So I loaded up and lay the bait, and I go sit on my car a ways away. My girlfriend's not going to be home from work for another hour, so I just figured I would use that time to try and get this thing. 30 minutes in, I'm watching the moon and the clouds. I'm listening to the wind and the June bugs. I feel something eerie, out of nowhere. I think it's probably just my mind wandering over old films and books. One that comes to mind is that Brothers Grimm flick, the one with the boy in the mud. You know the one. It was the worst thing to think of, basically. I had to talk myself down, thinking, okay, it's all good, everybody chill. Another 30 minutes go by, no raccoon. But I hear my girlfriend's truck coming up the road. There's no one else it could be. I hear her fiddling hard with the property gate, louder than usual. It slams closed. She pulls in with her high beams on. She doesn't blink at seeing me illuminated by the truck, holding a shotgun. As I said, she's just that way. I said, hey, I saw that raccoon, but before I could even finish, she just said, we need to go inside, hon. I thought, okay. She tells me that near the neighbor's place, she saw a weird-looking deer. It was almost like it was running in slow motion, as if it was treading through water. It was coming across the road, looking straight at her in the brights, except it had an extra joint in the front legs, and no ears, and no tail. The torso was way too long, like it had extra ribs. My girlfriend is not one for tall tales or to generally be shook up by anything. So after that, we stay inside. We lock up. Anytime I had to go to the bathroom, she wouldn't let me go to the outdoor toilet. So I basically just peed off the porch for the rest of the night. She's also told me that the woods here are very friendly in the warmer months, but in the winter, don't go anywhere. They're extremely foreboding, don't want you there. Sometimes you can hear laughter from the swamps. This will be in the dead of night in -20 Fahrenheit weather. No sane person should be out there, and there probably isn't any person out there at all. So this is my uncle's story, not mine. About 40 years ago, in 1985, He lived in the bayou in the middle of nowhere, Mississippi. He had a cozy wooden cabin surrounded by miles of swampland. His nearest neighbor, and also his closest friend, lived about a mile away from him. They shot the shit all the time, doing typical hick stuff like hunting alligators. So about the 5th year of living in the bayou, my uncle wakes up in the middle of the night. He doesn't know why he woke up, but he was covered in a thick layer of sweat and was panting. Anyway, he just lunges for the gun under his bed for no reason at all. He said it was totally instinctual. He held that gun so hard his knuckles turned white, pointing at the door. After an hour, nothing happens. He puts the gun away and tries to fall back asleep, kind of embarrassed. Then his friend calls him. My uncle picks up the phone, and his friend is just in hysterics. My uncle has to calm him down for almost half an hour before he could get any words through. Then his friend said, "Look up at the sky." My uncle took his shotgun and ran outside. The night sky was covered in strange lights. My uncle described them as small, burning balls of fire. They moved erratically and seemed to teleport from place to place. My uncle flips out and runs back inside and locks the door. He spends the rest of the night with his gun in his hand. Eventually, the exhaustion got to him and he passed out. He woke up with the light hitting his face. He went outside, still holding his gun. The air has a strange metallic smell to it, and there are no insect noises in the swamp of all places. This is a huge red flag. My uncle calls his friend again, but his friend does not pick up. My uncle decides to trek to his friend's house. He couldn't take his truck because it just stopped working. The whole thing was dead. The whole swamp was absolutely silent. Eventually, my uncle reaches the house. The place is ransacked. Everything is thrown all over the place. Everything is smashed. His friend is nowhere to be found. There are strange carvings in the wood, which my uncle said looked like schematics more than any language. In the bedroom, the bed was soaked with blood and feces. My uncle goes to call the cops, but they won't pick up. He leaves his friend's house back to his to wait for whatever weird power outage was going on. Later that day, the insect sounds slowly came back, and the air lost the metallic taste that it had. My uncle was beginning to calm down, and reasons that maybe his friend had been kidnapped. The lights must have been dreams. And then there was a knock at the door. My uncle thinks it's the cops and opens the door, so relieved. But it's not. 2 of the tallest white men that he had ever seen were standing in black suits. I mean upwards of 7 feet tall. My uncle was tall as hell, but they dwarfed him. They tell my uncle to forget about what he saw. Their voices, deep and guttural. Their faces were like plastic. My uncle gets pissed and tells them to F off. They just stare at him. My uncle shuts the door in their face and grabs his gun. When he opens the door, the men are gone. And then he sees them. His property was a clear lot surrounded by swamp. On the periphery of his property were the men, and many more of them. They completely surrounded him, just staring. My uncle gave in on the verge of tears. I won't say anything, I promise. He never saw the men again. He moved away a few months later. To this day, he has no idea what happened to his friend. So, what did you think of those encounters? Which one was your favorite? Which one stuck out to you? If there's one in particular, let me know which one it was down in the comments. And I think one other thing that's pretty scary is that I'm officially a year older now. My birthday was this week, so if you have an April birthday, give us a shout out down in the comments. And, of course, if you enjoyed the video, you can like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Share the video, comment on the video, and everything. You guys know what to do. And, of course, if you would like to donate to the channel, there's super thanks here on YouTube. There's memberships. There's a PayPal and a Patreon, all down in the description below. And with that, I think that I will see you in the next one. Thank you for pulling up a stump with me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you Friday.